morning. My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Strategies for Effective Craft Beverage Front of House Operations, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. We are recording today's presentation, and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the expected large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the Virginia SBDC Craft Beverage Assistance Program Manager, Chris Van Orden.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this conversation about front of house staffing and operations. As Sheila said, my name is Chris Van Orden, and I'm the manager of the Craft Beverage Assistance Program here at the Virginia SBDC. The Craft Beverage Program is designed to provide industry-specific assistance to Virginia's craft beverage sector. So today's program will be a free-flowing discussion about improving tasting room performance. You can enter any questions that you have in the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer everything either during or after the webinar. So I'm excited to welcome back today's speaker, Andrew Coplon, founder of Secret Hopper and Craft Beer Professionals. Andrew helps breweries nationwide create more memorable and profitable taproom experiences using database insights gathered from thousands of visits. He's successfully built a community of, wow, I didn't realize, 16,000 craft beer professionals.
It's grown a little bit, Chris, actually over 18 now.
There we go. I need to update my stats here. 18,000 craft beer professionals dedicated to the growth and betterment of our industry across the U.S. Welcome, Andrew. Thanks for coming back.
Appreciate you having me, Chris. And it was great seeing you in person last week in Maryland.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you being here for this today. We've got plenty to talk about. So we're basically focused on front of house operations, tasting rooms, tap rooms, in-house restaurants, whatever model the producer has to directly reach customers on their own premises. So I figure we could start out with a why. Why is this so important to get right?
Yeah, great question. And everybody, thanks for being here. I'd love to take any questions, so feel free to ask any if you want to connect following. Always up for a quick conversation on taproom and hospitality. So when I got into the industry in 2017, I was preaching engagement. I was preaching education, you connecting with your guest. But I actually wasn't using the word hospitality. But at the end of the day, that was what I was preaching. And now, as we know, it's not just about the beverage that you're serving. It's not just about beer. It's not just about wine. It's not just about spirits. It's creating memorable experiences that everybody craves. And for me personally, when I go out to a brewery, winery, distillery, whatever it is, I'm looking for an experience where I can have a good time. I can have a beverage that I want to have, where my wife can have a beverage. Maybe she doesn't want beer that day. Maybe she wants a glass of wine, so that diversity in beverage offerings is nice. But also, the 6-year-old I'm bringing along with me, maybe he just wants to have a pizza. So instead of maybe a decade ago in the beer space just trying to attract those beer nerds, we have to attract all kinds and different audiences, because the longer they stay, the longer everybody spends. So hospitality is the business you are in. And I want to tell a quick story that I think really shows how far we've come. And for everybody not in the beer world, I still think you'll understand this. So we host in-person workshops all across the country, and I was in New Orleans in December. I was sitting at a table with some taproom managers and some owners, and they were talking about kids in breweries. Who here loves having kids in your tasting room? Yeah, everybody has mixed feelings. It's a arguably controversial topic there. But instead of talking about whether or not we should allow kids and children in breweries, they were literally talking about how can we make the most of their time there? Should we build a playground? Should we have juice boxes? What are your thoughts on goldfish? I hate cleaning them up. They were literally talking about upsell opportunities for kids. And it blew my mind, because just a few years ago, seltzer was controversial. Kids were controversial. Now AI is controversial. But it's really interesting to see how our industry evolves, because it's so important to create these memorable experiences, no matter who your guest is, that motivates them to spend money while they're in your tasting room and come back and bring their friends and bring their family.
And yeah, that is fascinating to hear. That conversation would have been anathema just a few years ago, but there you go. That's everybody's got to keep updating the model and do what they can to kind of make this work for them. Um, so there's a lot that goes into a high functioning tasting room. We obviously can't cover everything today. But I think we can spend the majority of our time together talking about staffing, right? Sort of people side of making a good experience. So maybe if you can give me just a good baseline, what would you say makes a good front of house team?
Yeah, so everybody today, I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record when I preach hospitality and engagement and education, but through our company's Secret Hopper, we have a data set of over 10,000 unique taproom visits since 2017, and a lot of the data points I'm going to reference come from that. And you think about your staff behind the bar. They're greeting guests. They're offering recommendations. They're helping them with the menu. Maybe they're offering a flight. Maybe they're checking back later on. Maybe they're telling them about events. Maybe they're encouraging them to sign up for your mailing list or loyalty program. They're thanking them on the way out. There's so many little things your team is doing. And at the end of the day, when you stack all of these little habits, it makes for a more engaging experience. For all of you, think about the times you've been to a winery, brewery, distillery, restaurant. You order a beverage, you finish the beverage, and you're just waiting. No one's coming by. You're not really sure where you should order another. Is there someone going to come to your table? Do you need to go to the counter? What are you going to do? You're going to get up and go, maybe to the restaurant next door to have a meal, maybe back to your house. It's these little habits that you can practice under the umbrella of engagement that create these more memorable experiences. And really, it comes down to having a hospitality mindset. It's not just going through the motions. I want to say that twice. It's literally not just going through the motions. People come to tap rooms to feel community. You come and you grab a beer. Maybe you're by yourself at the bar. The person next to you, you may not even know, but you have the shared connection over having the pint or a glass of wine or a spirit. But think about it. Like it's very similar to when you're traveling. When you're in an airport, the question you can ask anybody is, where are you going? It's something we all have in common. And the shared experience between staff and guest and other guests, creating this memorable hospitality experience is really what you should aim for. And it's not, as I mentioned, just going through the motions. One of my favorite things to preach is curiosity, asking questions. There are no dumb questions. When I do interviews just like Chris is doing right now, I have the opportunity to ask the often simple questions that no one wants to ask. So when you're engaging with a guest when they come in, have you been to our tasting room before? What brings you in today? You are the guide of their experience. And the more questions you can ask, the more it's going to open up the person on the other side of the bar to share about them. And it's going to allow you to better customize the experience for each and every person who comes to your tasting room. And think about it. In your tasting room, you will have busy shifts, you will have slow shifts, and it's all about the context there. When you have a line a mile deep on a Saturday afternoon, you can't take 5 minutes to get to know that guest, but you can try to find meaningful ways to engage during a short period of time. Hey, I'm Andrew. Welcome to the brewery. Have you been here before? What do you normally drink? Here's your anniversary lager that I think you'll really enjoy. I appreciate you coming today. I hope to see you soon. So it's about finding the appropriate level of engagement. That way, you're able to build those connections with your guests. And on the flip side, behind the bar, I imagine when your staff is working in your tasting room, in most situations, it's probably not just them behind the bar. Teamwork is so important. Say you have that chatty bartender who just won't stop talking to the guests. Maybe you compensate for that by having someone behind the bar who's super speedy and efficient, can pour pints to help move the line. It's really making sure that you have people behind the bar who like each other. I know it sounds so simple, but imagine Chris and I are behind the bar and we don't get along. I'm not going to hop in there to help him, and he's not going to hop in there to help me. And that's going to impact the guest experience. And guests are going to feel this energy. They're going to feel that weird presence that's going on, and they're not going to like the vibe. Front of house staff, they set the tone. And you owners, managers, front of house staff, it is on you to set the tone for all of your experiences in your tasting rooms.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot there. I'm gonna kind of dive into some of this here, but I think that your point about the sort of composition of the team is really important too. Thinking about different skill sets and inclinations, right? Complementary is a good thing. I do love me a sassy bartender every now and again, but not everybody does. And so, if you have a little bit of a sour, you maybe to have a little sweet attitudinally, whatever. That's great. Um, right, speaking about the people side, right? The actual individuals that they come to the hospitality side of the business from all walks of life. Typically, right, these are not people that, it's not, you don't go to a school per se, right? There's not always a formal certification. There are, right, obviously your sommeliers and cicerones and things like that, but that's not necessarily industry standard always. So, in your experience, kind of working with and knowing a lot of front of house staff, what are some of the backgrounds or experiences that make a good front of house employee? If somebody's trying to hire for the first time and maybe they don't say, "Oh, I've got 10 years of front of house experience," but what are, some backgrounds that people come from that are that tend to work out well in your experience?
So forgive me if I've shared this before, but I think it really speaks to the question you just asked. During the pandemic, so many tasting rooms lost their staff. Then they had to rehire. There was a cidery in Richmond who had lost their staff. Then they ended up hiring a team of out of work teachers. They knew very, very little about cider, but they were open to learning and they knew how to talk to people. And I'm not saying you should talk to your guests like they're 5-year-olds.
Hmm.
Maybe that can be helpful sometimes if they're a little unruly, but they had the ability to show empathy. They were able to connect with the guests. They were able to put themselves in the guest's shoes. They were reliable. They showed up, they took accountability for their actions, and they had that hospitality mindset. So hospitality experience is always great. If you can hire someone who's worked in another tasting room, a restaurant, maybe a hotel, in any of the walks that, hospitality businesses come, that typically can be valuable because they're not coming in a complete rookie. But it is
Hmm.
not required. I think, just like we said when you asked the last question, the willingness to learn and just simply being curious, those are some of the best qualities you can have as taproom staff. One thing that I love taprooms because you get to connect with strangers. So you really do need someone who's open to talking to strangers. I know it sounds so simple and basic, as will a lot of the things I say today, but we've all been in rooms, whether at a conference or a tasting room, where it's tough to break into a new circle. I think your team needs to be capable of breaking down those boundaries between you and the guest, but also connecting other guests. A tap room, it's a social environment, and the staff should be very, very comfortable in starting these conversations. And another quality, Chris, that I think is really important in the taproom staff, being able to adapt. There's going to be
Hmm.
fires that happen in the tap room. Maybe the
Hopefully not
keg
literally.
kicks.
Yeah.
Maybe someone spills an entire flight across your bar. You need to be able to think quick, stay cool, and really just figure out the best ways to handle those situations. So, kind of summing that up, the qualities that I like in taproom staff, once again, hospitality mindset. I'm going to beat that so hard today.
Hmm.
Empathy, willingness to talk to strangers, just desire to ask questions and be reliable, but also, as mentioned, just being able to adapt. If you're not able to adapt, then on a busy Saturday afternoon, when you're used to those slow Thursday shifts, you are going to struggle and it's going to impact the entire business. And when it impacts the entire business, everybody makes less money, everybody has not quite as good a time, and they might not come back next time.
Yeah, yeah. That's helpful. Right. So I think that you're right. If somebody that's come through hospitality already, they're often a known quantity. It's like, hey, I've worked in these settings. Great. I've been at that place before. Or maybe you've served me a drink before. I know who you are. But there's people. I think the teacher story is a great one because that is teachers are no nonsense, right? They're tough when they need to be. Great skill set. Um, Right. But so if you have somebody who maybe doesn't come from the industry, there might be a little bit more time and investment to incorporating that new team member. So if you're working, when you're working with a company, let's say, how do you recommend that they approach the process of onboarding new front of house staff?
So the number one mistake I do not want anyone to do here is just throw them behind the bar. Oh, I've worked at
Mhm.
another brewery before. Great. You'll be ready for a Friday night shift. Do not do that.
Hmm.
Every tasting room is different. And it's, two sides to it. You've got the hard skills and you've got the soft skills. Me personally, I love a good checklist, whether that's for training someone with a checklist or maybe just a daily task that they're going to do when they're getting ready for their shift or closing out the shift. And then as managers and owners, it's important for you to teach both the hard and soft skills. Like the hard skills, pouring the beer, using
Hmm.
the POS, understanding the menu. And I'm going to get really basic here. Turning on the lights. Like, what if they show up for the shift and they don't know where to turn the lights on? I know it sounds so dumb and basic, but you need to go over these things. Where is the mop closet? How do I
Hmm.
log in to the POS system? These are things that sound very, very basic, but in case of an emergency situation or just in case a fire happens, they need to be able to handle these things. So that's half of it. Training this staff to handle those hard skills and shadowing is a really great way to handle that. Someone shows up, you can do some sort of informal training session with them where you walk through everything, but have them walk through with someone who's done it before. Have them work with an experienced team member and see how they interact with guests, how they handle these situations. But on the soft skills, we often think that, oh, yeah, everybody knows how to greet guests, introduce themselves, guide the conversations. But through the secret hopper data that we have, you'd be very, very surprised how often a lot of the behaviors we're going to discuss today aren't happening. Guests aren't greeted all the time. Nearly 50% of the time, a guest is not encouraged to have another drink or beer to go. These are things that just simple questions can solve the problem. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many things that the staff is doing, and the goal is to ingrain these as habits. So, maybe create an employee handbook. I'm sure there's someone on your team who has
Hmm.
experience doing that, or you can find someone to help out with that. But go over the hard skills where everything is, the soft skills like greeting guests, as mentioned, guiding the conversations, the behaviors that you want them to do. But when you're teaching the staff these things, and this is something that I've learned when we work with breweries, it's often nice for the brewery, winery, distillery to have someone not on their team say something. You all know how it is. You, as the owner, can tell the staff to sell more to go product all day long. They probably get a little tired of you saying that. But when you can have a third party come in and say, hey, here's what you should be doing, here's how often it is happening, and here's the benefit of it happening to you, they can see the value in it. And talking about to go beer, and we primarily do work with breweries, but I think this will resonate with everybody. All of you want to have more product go out your door. We see that taproom staff encourage to go beer 19% of the time. And when staff don't ask the question, the guest makes the purchase on their own 9% of the time. But when Chris magically goes, Andrew, you really enjoyed that Belgian IPA. Do you want to take a limited edition six pack home? The guest says yes 49% of the time. Literally, nearly 50% of the time by asking that question. So, why am I telling you this? You can tell your staff, you can write a handbook, you can train them, but they like to know the why behind the action. Don't just tell them to do it. They're not going to be able to do 10 things at once. Give them a goal for the week. This can be for new staff members or it can be for staff who's been with you 5 years. Have these metrics to monitor, and I'm sure we'll go into that shortly.
Yeah.
But make sure you're telling them why they need to be doing these actions versus just doing them. Another really important thing you can teach your team when they first join your business is the story behind your business. Why did the winemaker start? Why did the brewery owner, decide to open up this business? Make sure they can tell that story. I love going into a new place and feeling like I left knowing more about them because that is what creates the attachment. And I've said before, it's not just about serving the beverage. Yes, that's the conduit that brings us all together, but it's about creating these experiences, once again, that we all crave. And you need to really stress with your team the hard skills, the soft skills, and the storytelling.
Yeah, those are great. I feel like I want to dive into all of them, but I definitely appreciate, I'm a guy who loves a checklist and SOP sheet, right? Standard operating procedures, right? Lack of clarity is the easiest way for things to go sideways, where you think you know what breakdown looks like, and then you think, oh, well, the manager does this. Well, no, it's actually the last staff person, and all of a sudden, nobody's turned out the lights and the lights aren't all night, or worse, locking the doors, or right, flushing lines, or who's doing the line cleaning, or whatever the case may be. A simple one that I know is just, well, what's the process for swapping out a keg when it goes down, right? Uh, Ideally you run it all the way empty. Obviously, there's issues or foaming or troubleshooting, but like even just, well, you need to put the next keg on. Where does that come from? What's the process for noting that, making sure that it gets recorded? So you're fully above board with ABC and TTB, right? All of that stuff needs to be trained. But I really like the idea of having a checklist for the soft skills of saying, right, it's not just here are the, robot, just the moves. Like these are the pure functional elements of the job. But, right, making sure you're asking these things, making sure that, is there a particular way that you greet people? Is there a tone? Are there a couple of regulars that you should know? Because right, a regular doesn't love if all of a sudden there's a new bartender that doesn't know that, oh, as soon as they walk in, you make sure you're pouring them a glass of, right, every time they walk in, they start with a glass of Sauvignon Blanc or, right, the Pilsner, whatever the case may be. Those types of things are trainable, but you can't just let it happen. And right, maybe they'll pick it up via shadowing. But I think that being explicit with that stuff, I have a friend whose favorite saying is, "Clear is kind, and unclear is unkind." So all of these things, you give people the opportunity to succeed, and they're gonna do better. The business is gonna do better. They're gonna make more tips. Everyone's gonna be happier.
And the easier you can make things for your staff and the easier you can make things for your guests, the better experience it is for everybody. Like if the to-go fridge is 100 feet all the way that way, no one's going to be motivated to ask the question, do you want to-go beer? And the staff guest is not going to even see it. So the easier you can make things, the more likely you are going to, do well with everything we're talking about today.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that whole training process, it's good, right? Giving people a specific amount of time, a certain number of shifts before they are fully on their own. Are there any other elements to the sort of training period that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, and just some basics, make sure they know about your product. You don't want them
Mhm.
behind the bar and someone asks about a beverage and them have no idea how to explain it. There's a brewery I actually was on a panel with up in Vermont a couple years ago, and I loved what they did with their menu. On one side of the menu, they had the brewer's description. It was super technical. It talked about all the hops, the IBUs, the stuff the beer nerd in us absolutely love. And on the other side of the menu was their partner's description of it. The perfect beer to drink as you're cutting the grass on a sunny day. Oh, I get that. You really need to
Mhm.
think as we try to attract new audiences in your tasting rooms, are we making it approachable to them? Whether beer, wine, spirits, cider, whatever business you may be in, there are people who have never been to that type of business before. So if they walk in, will they understand how the experience works? No one likes being frustrated. And it kind of goes back to making things easy. If they don't know where to order, okay, well, that's going to be kind of confusing. If they don't know what the product even tastes like, they're going to be a little confused to order. There was one brewery I went to once, and I'm not going to name this spot because they've gotten a lot better, but
Mhm.
I walked up. I did not know where to order. I finally got to the register and I looked at the menu. On a menu, I like to see the name of the beverage, the type of beverage, the style. I like to see the alcohol content. I like to see the sizing that it comes in. I like to see whether I can take it to go. There's lots of criteria I like. I honestly personally love like flavor words,
Mhm.
like citrusy, light. I love
Mhm.
malty. I love words that kind of, oh yeah, I know what that tastes like. So I went to this place and I ordered two beers that they were known from. And mind you, this menu did not have a lot of the information that I just referenced. So I was strictly going off of name. I ordered two half pours. I asked which is which. They could not tell me. Product knowledge, right? You can give someone the best beverage they've ever had, but if they don't know about it, you don't give the guest the tools to order it again. I think a simple hack for this is just like a sheet of paper behind the bar. If you have, say, 10 beers, 10 types of wine, put each there and just basic flavor notes. That way, if someone doesn't know, they can at least sound educated or maybe recommended if you like. In the beer world right now, you see a lot of breweries doing light American lagers. Oh, recommended if you like Miller Lite or PBR. Okay, perfect. Or recommended if you like typically craft cocktails, this one's a little tart and fruity. You might like this one. So it's really important to be able to guide the guest through the menu. And it comes down to just curiosity. Imagine walking into a tap room and it's an overwhelming tap list. You, as team members and staff, your job is to help narrow it down and find what's right for that person. So, me personally, maybe I like imperial stouts, but let's pretend it's a hot summer day. You have an imperial stout on the menu, but that might not be the option for me. So instead of saying, well, what do you normally drink? Perhaps the question becomes, what are you in the mood for? And I really like that one because it really makes you think about the moment. And that's the goal. And I give Katie at the Glass Jug, I was on a panel with her a few years ago in North Carolina, credit for teaching me that line because it makes so much sense. There's things that we like, and I don't want them all the time, you know, but there's things that are right for that moment. I think it's a really great thing. Another thing that I think is important to train staff on is upselling in a natural way. You
Hmm.
don't want to get really, really aggressive with it. Hey, Chris, do you want to take some to go? Hey, Chris, do you want to take some to go? Whoa, Andrew, back away. It's more like, hey, you really enjoyed that new lager we have. Did you know we have it to go for just a limited time? Make it feel like the guest is winning. Like, make it
Hmm.
feel like if they don't do it, they're going to lose out. Get them pumped so it feels like, oh, wow, if I don't make this decision, safe decision, of course, then they're going to be missing out on something. Another thing I think is really important is being able to kind of handle difficult situations. Whether it's kids running around the tap room, whether it's the guest who's just super angry and yelling at everybody, being able to diffuse. And I'm not able to teach everybody how to do this right now, but make sure in your handbook, perhaps you have some scenarios that train your team how to handle complaints or maybe overly intoxicated guests, or maybe those kids who just won't sit with their parents. And that's probably a whole nother fun problem you all have to deal with.
Yeah, that's great. Lots of good things there. And I will echo your point about the importance of having multiple ways to sell a specific product. I know eh, it's rare that somebody goes too deep on process things for me, even though no one wants me anywhere near a production floor, but I value that stuff, is find it super interesting. Not the best pitch for everybody. But it's important to have write multiple. I used to have to write copy about product saying like this is what it tastes like, and sometimes even before the product was released, because that's the way beer works, right? But coming up with the language that's gonna appeal to different audiences, and you can kind of give them the tips for reading people about what they might want, or kind of getting some feedback from them about, all right, here's the way I want to be sold. But I think that the connection between front of house staff and back of house and the production team, so that they can understand the process, right? I mean, you never need to know all of the decisions made in this, but hey, like you said, why did the winemaker like making this wine? Oh, they wanted to make this particular style of Sauvignon Blanc because they trained in New Zealand and they really like that grassy flavor. So they took these couple of steps so that, well, we're not looking at a French Sauv Blanc. This is much more New Zealand style, no oak, etc. That's going to be really helpful for people if somebody's a huge Sauvignon Blanc, because there's a chance that they're going to be disappointed if they go in with a certain set of expectations. But you can say, well, this is why it's made this way. This is, oh, you like that a little bit more? Well, you might be a little bit more inclined to this wine. I'm not going to, if just automatically default to Sauvignon Blanc because you said these words. But, having just enough information to be able to meet people where they're at and give them the information that's going to get them excited about the drink, about appreciate the sort of work that went into it. That's a good selling proposition a lot of
And
times.
I will add, if your tasting room staff is asked a question they don't know the answer to, don't make up an answer. Don't avoid it. Go ask someone who knows the answer. Tell the guest, you know what? That's a great question. Let me go ask the winemaker, the brewmaster, someone, and I'm going to find out. That's going to make a difference to them.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, fudging it is never never a good option, because yeah, you can lose a lot of trust that way for sure. So let's say you onboard a new person, they're up and running, they're fully incorporated into the team. Now we're talking about measuring performance, right? It is a business in the end, of course, right? There's all different ways to measure front of a house performance. You mentioned, obviously you have the data about going from 9% of people taking home product to almost 50%. That's obviously one metric, but can you talk about different ways to measure tasting room performance?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one. There is the hard data. Like, to go beer sales, like we just talked about. We can look at one of my favorites is tip percentage. So let's
Mm.
back up a sec though. When we look at the tasting room experience and what we have seen over the past few years, I'm going to cite some data really quick. From the era of 2017 to 2020, looking at low engagement tap room tasting room visits when you go somewhere and the staff is barely walking through the motions versus high engagement when you go and you say, "Oh my gosh, I learned so much. Chris was absolutely amazing. I can't wait to come back and visit him." The difference in those visits in 2017 to 2020 was 14%. So people who had that high engaging visit spent 14% more when they had an engaging team member. Fast forward a little bit to 2021 to 2022 when we're all craving a little bit more connection. The low versus high engagement visits were nearly 30% higher spend there. Now let's look at 2022 to nearly present. Tabs are nearly 40% higher when someone receives a high level of engagement at the visit. Now, the engagement metric is kind of a feel good one. It's something we monitor in our secret hopper ones. We ask people to say, how did you perceive the level of engagement on your experience? But there is a way that you can measure it in your tasting rooms, no matter what you do. And you can use your POS. A metric that corresponds with engagement is tip percentage. Tip percentage is probably my favorite metric because you all know how it is when you go to a restaurant, bar, whatever it is, and you have that server, bartender who's just terrible. Are you going to tip much? No, you might tip them 17%. Let's just say you tip them 70%. But let's say I go and Sheila's awesome behind the bar. I'm going to tip her 27%. So if your POS allows you to break it down per team member, I really encourage you to monitor the tip percentage because it will nearly immediately show you who's engaging with a guest at a high level. If your POS doesn't allow that and everybody's kind of on the same login, you can look at trends. I mean, of course, if you have 10 people in the shared login, that could be a little difficult, but it is, say you have a shift where you have three of the same people and the trend is whenever Andrew's working, the tip percentage is lower. Really, really look at that data. And when it comes to data, as I mentioned earlier, you got to tell your staff why all of this matters. You want them to do all these habits. Well, we're going to start measuring your tip percentage. We're going to start measuring how much to go product you're putting out the door. We're going to start measuring your average tab size. And those are three metrics you should all be starting right now. I mean, those are three really, really easy ones. And then you should monitor them over time. Okay, for the month of March, we're going to see who on our team has the highest tip percentage. Now, I want to put a caveat there. So, with that, you might have a rock star on your team who is consistently hitting that 27% mark. And if you're recognizing them for doing a great job, it could be demotivating to the staff member who's really, really trying, but not quite clicking. So, one thing to also think about is reward people and recognize people and motivate people based on improvements. Don't just do it as, hey, whoever has the highest of whatever metric it may be. Also, look at who's showing progress along the way. And I think that's really important to share with your team the data you're monitoring, why it's important, and mix it up over time because you can't tell them to do 10 things at once. I'm going to keep beating that one, but you can't. Give them the metric and monitor one metric for a period of time and just see how everybody does. Also, when it comes to more of the soft skills that are you can't really measure. Granted, the data we collect through Secret Hopper can measure some of these, but even if you're not working with a company like us, sit at the end of the bar sometimes. Ask some of your regulars, how's Chris doing behind the bar? Simply observe. Oh, I see that he's not greeting any guests. He's not being proactive. He's waiting for guests to engage with him. He's not thanking guests on the way out. Simply watch, observe. It's really easy. I'm not saying, micromanage Chris and just sit in front of him
Hmm.
watching his every move, but, pull your laptop up to a bar, have a pint at the end of the shift, and just out of the corner of your eye, just see how your team's doing. And instead of saying, hey, Chris, you did not do a good job greeting guests today, take it as a moment of coaching. Sit down and offer some suggestions of ways that person can feel more comfortable engaging with the guest. And I think that's really important, finding the right ways to engage with your team so the things that you want them to do, they're going to improve on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that it's nice that in this particular sector, there's a very direct correlation with the sort of things that are good for the company and front of house staff making more money in a tipped industry. If they have a better experience, people like spend more money on the actual product and they stand to make more money themselves. So you're not just saying, "Oh, I want to get more out of you," but hey, you might get tipped out a little bit more at the end of the shift if you're If you're doing these couple of easy things, right? And those things it's not rocket science, but it could be hard to keep in mind when you're moving fast. So, um, I wanted to kind of follow that thread a little bit here about, right, there's the tips. Hey, do these things, improve a little bit more. There's also ways to kind of maybe use incentives to get staff to perform a little bit higher, right? If it's saying different sets of goals, things that are good for the company, ways to incentivize. And you mentioned not just highest performer, but most improved, right? I'm thinking about high school like superlatives or things like that. So, can you talk a little bit about incentives in the front of house space?
Yeah, I love talking about incentives and motivation. And you said something a moment ago that I wish was always true, but unfortunately, I don't think it's always true. You would
Hmm.
think saying that, hey, if you sell more to-go beer, you're going to have higher tabs and make higher tips and you're going to make more money. Hooray, that's great. I'm making more money. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, in today's world, money may not be the greatest motivator for some people, especially the younger generations there. So you really need to think about your team just like you think about your guest. Every guest deserves a customized experience, and every person on your team deserves the same. So I encourage you when you're onboarding them, or maybe regularly when you're just checking in, why are they working in your tasting room? Is it a college job? Are they trying to just pay their bills? Do they want to own their own winery someday? Do they want to be your next tasting room manager? The better you can understand their goals, the better you can customize that experience for them. And we talk about the superlatives. I mean, I think recognition really, really goes a long way. People like to feel appreciated. Chris, Sheila, you're doing a great job. Thanks for selling the most to go wine this past Saturday. Publicly call out people, include it in the team newsletter, put it on the wall in the break room, just shouting out people. Some people like to be recognized publicly for the work that they do. Some people like rewards. Hey, Chris, you sold the most to go beer the other day. Here is a gift card to a local restaurant. And, when it comes to like what people want, ask the team. Not everybody's going to want the same thing, so make sure you understand what they want. But some people prefer that sort of a reward, maybe even as a trophy above the recognition. I talk about opportunity. Some people might want to run their own tasting rooms one day. So maybe that person who does something that you've been monitoring really, really well or is the most improved, maybe they want to get Cicerone certified. Maybe they want to become a sommelier. Maybe you give them the opportunity to go through that process. And when I first started writing about motivation a few years ago, there's one thing that I actually didn't include. And what people like to see progress. People like to see that they're moving in an upward trajectory there. Think back once again to being in school. Say we had a fundraiser, Chris, we're raising money. You see like the almost like the thermostat just going
Hmm.
up and up and up and up. It's like, oh, we're so close to that goal. Let me just donate $1 more. Progress can be a motivator. But kind of bringing it back, you need to be able to monitor the things you want your team to be good at, and you need to have metrics that they understand and you can monitor and share with them if you actually want to see the results. And at the end of the day, people are working in the alcohol industry probably because they think it's fun. So make sure the experience for them, that taproom culture, is positive and it's collaborative.
I love it. Right. Ideally, this works, and you have a really dedicated staff. It's always, I think, a feather in the cap of a company if they've had front of house staff in particular that's been there for years, right? Sometimes, like, yeah, it's great that you're still here. Like that speaks well to the company. But of course, people lose front of house staff for all kinds of reasons. They go back to other industries, they move, whatever the case may be. Um, and customers, right, develop personal bonds with their regular bartenders. Hiring and retraining is costly. All kinds of reasons why loss and attrition is painful. So, what tips do you have for companies that are maybe need to improve when it comes to hanging on to their customer-facing folks?
Yeah, that's a great one, Chris. So, Crappy Professionals partners with Crafted Insights. We do a yearly workplace satisfaction report where we look at what people's experiences are like working in breweries in both sides of it, production, taproom, and everywhere else. And we see that turnover is much higher in front of house roles. So that kind of sucks. We see that 40% of front of house employees reported being in their role for just 1 to 3 years. So there's definitely more turnover in these roles. And you need to understand once again why people are working at your place. You need to make sure those staff members, they feel respected and supported and understanding what they're looking to get out of working at your business, just like the guests would. I mean, going back to the training side, communication is so important. Once again, you can't just throw people behind the bar and not give them any expectations. You need to make sure they're aware of what the experience is going to be like. And you can do this by understanding what they're looking for. As I just talked about with motivation, you need to understand what they're looking to get out of this. Do they want growth? Do they want to learn more about brewing? Maybe they want to be thrown in the back of house to kind of help out back there someday so they can understand the full experience. Do they want to kind of shine at management perhaps someday? Or are they awesome at events? Get to know your team and give them things they enjoy to do. It sounds so basic, but people like to do things that they're good at and they have fun doing. If you put someone in a role that they just don't enjoy, there's one foot out the door already. And I think another thing, and this often goes something we don't think about, stability. If someone is
Mhm.
hired to work at your business, how many hours are they realistically going to get? If you're going to tell them, 35 hours a week, but then, oh, we're slower this time, you're only going to get 17 hours, people gotta pay bills. Let them realistically know what to expect, and having scheduling stability can be very, very important. So they can plan their life just like you're planning your business. And a simple win for everyone is tell people that they're appreciated. I know it's so simple. Maybe you can't pull gift cards. Maybe you can't go out and order trophies to give to your top performers, but let people know you appreciate them. Many of you are running small businesses. Let them know that the little things that they're doing actually make a difference. I think that is perhaps the most important thing. We're all struggling to stay afloat. Beverage industry is changing these days. It's tough out there, but just let your team know you're happy they're there and you appreciate everything they do.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah. These are people too, right? It's not just outward facing to the customers. Your team has those same kinds of motivational questions. Hey, what are they hoping to get here? Are they having a good experience? And that's going to be passed down, all the way through the transaction from ideally keep the business trucking along. Um, Bit of a non sequitur here, but I want to make sure that I cover this. Um, right. Front of house, there's a lot of things that need to get done. Um, are there any responsibilities that you find are regularly undervalued or missed entirely when people divvy up the front of house workload?
So responsibility is an interesting word for this one, but I am going to consider this a responsibility. A responsibility is anything a taproom staff should do over the course of the shift, whether it's, business facing or whether it's guest facing. And one of the things that I see staff do fairly poorly, in addition to encouraging to go product, everybody please get better at encouraging to go product. I will play a
Hmm.
game with my wife and I will say, if I go into a tap room and they ask me to take some to go, I will only say yes if they ask. And as I share with the data, often I leave empty-handed there. Give people reasons to return. If someone's coming to your tasting room for, say, a Saturday market, oh, you enjoy craft markets? Did you know our next is on the third Sunday in April? Give people reasons to visit again. Don't assume they know everything. Signage is a thing we can talk about on a whole nother level, but often they might not see that little tabletop. They might not see the bulletin board that has everything. As someone interacting with a guest, encouraging those repeat visits and letting them know that you have things that interest them. Oh, you really enjoyed that barrel aged stout. Well, we're putting out a new variant of it next Thursday. Give people that invitation to come back. I think another thing that you should mention too, staff should do is I talk about that confusing experience I had where I received two of the same beers that were exactly the same and they couldn't, help me with that. Look for guests who look confused. If someone's just struggling to make out your menu or just looks lost or overwhelmed, offer to help. Once again, so basic, but show that empathy. Hey, have you been here before? What do you normally drink? I'd love to find something that's right for you. I love flights. Everybody behind the bar often has mixed feelings on flights, but we see that when someone orders a flight, their overall tab's going to be 25% higher. Why do you think? because you are helping them find what's right for them, and they're going to be more likely to order another beverage while they're there, and also more likely to come back. So, helping guests connect with that unique aspect of your business that resonates with them. Maybe it's the beverage, maybe it's the events, maybe it's the food. Who knows what it could be? But there's so many things you all are doing these days, and it is your job as guides to make sure they're aware of wherever that is. And you can do that by simply asking questions. So really, just don't be afraid to ask a question. There's no dumb questions.
I love it. Well, I think that we're, basically there on sort of what I was hoping to cover today. But before I kind of let you go here, I was wondering if you had any final thoughts that you'd like to share on the subject of kind of making the most of front of house.
Yeah, just a few reminders. Invest in your front of house team just like you do back of house. It's so important. Make sure you give them the hard and soft skills for success. Use data. Don't just kind of do it anecdotally. Use data, whether it's POS data, some data that we can provide. Use data to show your staff the reasons behind all the things you want them to do. Encourage staff to be themselves, be authentic, have fun. The more fun people have in your tasting in your tap room, the more it benefits everybody. And once again, guests spend 40% more when they receive that highly engaged experience in your tasting room. So as a reminder, you are in the hospitality business and we're creating memories. So get to know your guest and have fun with it, everybody.
I love it. Andrew, thank you so much for your time and insights here. Always appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us for today's discussion. If you're interested in kind of any assistance from the Craft Beverage Assistance Program, you can visit our page on virginiasbdc.org. Each month we host another session in this series, so keep your eyes peeled for the next one. But for now, I'd like to just say thanks again to Andrew Coplon for his time.
Appreciate you both and everybody for joining.
I agree. Andrew, Chris, thank you both. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. As a reminder, you're going to receive an email with a link to this recording. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. We hope to see you all at our next craft beverage session. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.